His talk is called Automating Building Permitting, the Killer App for BIM. And to learn all about that and to get some very appreciated encouragement in this field, please welcome to the stage Mr. Jaan Saar.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the nice introduction. And thank you, Richard, for doing a great job of opening up about what is Open BIM and open standards and why we need them. And I must say, this is one of the most attentive audiences I've seen in a while. You guys make zero noise. I mean, during the presentations, it's so quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Yeah, it's a little bit different in different regions of the world. Recently, Richard as well, we were in Marrakesh. Slightly more noise there maybe among the audience. But yeah, it's really great to have such great listeners. And I hope to share with you a little bit and give forward some knowledge about BIM-based permitting, why I think it's important, why it is, as I call, a killer app. But yeah, just as a start about me, but everything is more or less said. Maybe a slight update. We just had the EU BIM Task Group General Assembly in Berlin last week, and I had to step down from the position of chair because the EU BIM Task Group is a group of public clients and policymakers. I'm neither a public client or a policymaker. I work for Future Insight now. But before that, I used to work for the Estonian government. And on behalf of Estonia, I would like to thank again Iceland for recognizing Estonia, being one of the first countries to recognize Estonia as an independent sovereign nation back in the early 90s, when we managed to get out from under Soviet oppression. So that's why it's really nice to be in Iceland. And I feel the warmth in the room, outside the room, a little bit less. But it's still really nice, and I spent my vacation here last summer, and I really enjoyed the nature, the scenery, yeah, the landmannalaugar, all that stuff. So, yeah, but you know all about it. Let's talk about a little bit why I am here and what is the challenge we're tackling. And there's a lot of technical stuff we can talk about, but the real problems, the real challenges are the climate change. And this is something I think nobody can deny anymore. There's no argument about it. It is here, and it is causing havoc, and it is something that we all have to think about how we're going to fix. And although this is not directly involved with our industry, but as we already heard, this industry is full of greenhouse gases, and it does mean that we have a huge impact on the environment. So we need to reduce waste, as Richard said, to help save the planet. And we see the results, maybe not so much warmer weather here, but we see the extremes happening everywhere. The ice is melting, we see floods, we see fires. And this is going to lead at some point eventually to mass migration, because certain parts of the world are not going to be very nice to habit. And believe it or not, I think this region will become a much nicer and sought after destination for many, because it will be more nicer to live here, as well as in Estonia, where I'm from. And we're already facing a housing crisis, and it's only going to get worse. And everywhere you go, they talk about the housing crisis. We need to build more, faster, better, more efficiently. And at the same time, we are facing this onslaught of digital transformation. Everybody's talking about AI. We're talking about digital data, all of that stuff. And this is something that has happened so fast over the few past decades that, if you look at human history, the growth and the speed of evolution has become really exponential. So how do you tackle all those things at once? Obviously, we're not going to tackle all of them, or I don't have the answers. Maybe you do. I really hope. But we can start solving bit by bit, little by little, from our end of the industry. And that's why we come to data again in our industry. And as Richard said, it is all about the digital aspect of the industry, which maybe hasn't been that much, and why Building Smart was born was to help really the exchange of information. So you've maybe heard this expression that data is the new oil. And it was coined by Clive Humby, sorry. And, but a lot of people forget the other part of the sentence, which is that, yes, data is the new oil, but you need to find it, extract it, refine it, distribute it, and monetize it. Nobody keeps barrels of crude oil in their garage. I don't know, maybe some of you do, I doubt it. But you can't really, there's no use for crude oil. You need to refine it. And the same thing is with data. So even if everybody talks about we have this data, we need to use it, blah, blah, blah. How do you use it? And in our industry, BIM is an acronym for data, and we can spend hours on discussing what is the definition of BIM, but let's make it simple, and for this presentation, refer to data. So the question is how to get better value out of BIM, and how to make it accessible, refine it, and distribute it, or where you should start. And even though I'm talking about BIM-based permits, and I will get onto that in just a little while, I recently started thinking that we are not talking about the basics enough. Depending on the audience, of course, and here I think most of you are professionals and you already know this stuff. But occasionally, especially when I talk to governments and municipalities and public clients and policymakers, if you start talking about automating all the BIM permitting, they get lost. What you should start, or where you need to start, is about, again, just like with oil, you need to get it from somewhere, you need to store it. So the first step is really accessibility of BIM data. So you need to make it accessible, and you need to make it shareable. Then you come to the refinement. So you need to make sure that the data you're getting meets certain minimum requirements. And this is where IDS, of course, plays a crucial role and has developed really fast over the past years. And once you're there with the refinement, when you're sure that you have certain quality standards met, you validated the data, then you can move on to actually automating it. So you cannot run before you learn to walk, before you learn to crawl, as humans do. I don't know, some animals, I think they do come out and they start running quite fast, gazelles, I think. But yeah, they're a bad analogy. Let's stick to humans. Crawl, walk, and run. And because if you start automating bad data, you're gonna, automate some bad stuff, which is just gonna make things worse. So you wanna make sure you are able to store, share, validate before you start automating. And then you can really open up the floodgates and take advantage and have a kind of a platform approach where you can link this data and you can start using different systems and integrations and all kinds of use cases. So that's where you go to the platform approach. Maybe not start right away. If you haven't solved the question of where is your BIM data, how do you make sure it meets quality, and do you have workflows that you can automate? Before that, you shouldn't really start with going all, I want the greatest platform in the world. And yeah, I think this is just something you need to keep in mind. Now, building permits, why they matter? Well, we need building permits. We need building permits so to make sure that buildings are safe, they meet certain legal requirements, and we're using resources efficiently. And they are a key process in the building lifecycle. Although not the most efficient one, often it's quoted expensive, time-consuming, and complex, difficult, because it's regulation. Regulation is difficult. And the way to solve it is usually by just throwing more manpower at it, throwing more money at it. Let's just put more people to do these building permit checks and get on with it. But at the same time, we don't see this solving the problem. And municipalities are struggling with ever-increasing lengths of permitting. In the US, the national government has stepped in and started taking away or stepping into the building permitting process in certain states because they cannot manage it anymore. And that's a bad sign. So there needs to be a better way. And this is where we come to the killer apps analogy. Now, raise your hand if you've heard this term killer app. Who knows what a killer app is? Richard knows it. He heard it in Marrakesh. Some of you, but quite surprisingly few people know about the term killer app. So let me quickly explain it. Killer app is something that is a program or a feature of a program that is so good that it makes you want to use the whole surrounding ecosystem around that program, be it hardware, be it a platform, whatever. Some examples, VisiCalc was the first spreadsheet program. This was the killer app for the PC, the personal computer, because before that, companies didn't really know why we need PCs. But once they saw spreadsheets, and trust me, I know every single one of you in this room uses Excel at least 1, 2, 3, 5 times a week, if not daily. So all work boils down to Excel, and VisiCalc was the first Excel. For the graphical user interface, the Windows, the mouse, and all that, the killer app for this user interface was desktop publishing, because they first saw the power of it, doing newspapers and magazines, of how to do it all visually and not do it as cumbersome as you know, you've probably seen in movies or maybe in first-hand experience, these complicated machines you use to do printing presses and stuff. The internet killer app is a bit more difficult to pinpoint. Some say it's email. Email is a killer app for the internet, why we want to get connected. Some say it's HTML language. So the jury is still out on that one. The killer app for the iPhone, even Apple didn't realize it at first. It's not the sleek interface. It's not the integrated the software and the hardware. It is actually the App Store. The App Store was the killer app for the iPhone. Why it made it a success? Because Nokia already had similar phones way before Apple. But they didn't crack the idea that it's the App Store. And Apple also didn't realize it at first. But as soon as they realized it, they saw that this app ecosystem is going to drive the adoption of the whole platform, of the whole device. So personal computer, graphical user interface, the web, the internet, and the iPhone all had killer apps. What is the killer app for BIM? One of the killer apps, I think, is BIM-based permitting. And I'm going to explain why using the case sample of Estonia, where I come from. So I was in the ministry. We were doing a lot of stuff. Since 2016, so that's already like almost 10 years ago, Estonia has had a digital building permitting system, but it's been kind of paper-based, or digital paper-based. But this is what a building permit looks like in Estonia. It's a digitally signed container with an automatically generated PDF. There's a system for it. So it's all fine, but it's still kind of modeled after a paper-based process. And we saw that the building registry, which is kind of the official repository for built environment data, is becoming more and more, is having more and more features, or people are using it for different purposes, for statistics, for collecting data. And if you look at the process of who is involved, EHR is the acronym for building registry, and our industry loves acronyms, so why not throw some in there? The building registry or the building permit process was actually at the center of communication between all these different stakeholders in the building lifecycle. And if you think about it, our industry is very project-based, project-centric. It's always a project here, project there, different teams. But, and there's a lot of stakeholders involved. But there's always one stakeholder who is kind of involved in every project, and that is the government. That is either the local or the central government. Through approvals, through permits, information is flowing through them. And we saw this with the building registry, that all these stakeholders were communicating, exchanging information, approvals, energy labels, all kind of stuff started adding to the official repository. And it wasn't one-way communication, it was multiple, two-way communication. So really, this shows that the government is in a position to kind of be the glue between all these different stakeholders because they are involved in every project. And we started also developing, we had the building registry, which was for a very specific purpose, but we saw that it can be much bigger, and it should be much bigger. So we started developing the construction platform. Now, what is the construction platform? Let me just visualize it more graphically. In a classical information system, you have the database, you have the service layer, and you have the user interface layer. And the blue bars there are the services of the building registry. So we started expanding it. We started adding a utility network database. We started doing BIM-based permitting, which I'm going to talk about more. We started developing the national digital twin. And all these services meant there's more databases, more data to connect to. But it doesn't mean we're putting everything in one database or we're putting everything in one file. You shouldn't put everything in one IFC. So it is a distributed network, and it's not only for government services, but the pink bars at both ends represent private sector services, which we also started adding to the platform. And the platform itself is formed through these service layer. So this is the e-construction platform. And it's essentially, it's not some super database or super system. It's actually an interconnected network of different services, which have their own relevant databases. And what you need, what the platform provides, is actually a set of agreements. It is a common architecture, at least on the API level, that we know how to exchange information. A common language as much as possible. So here we're talking about open standards, classifications, stuff like that. And the most important part is a common philosophy that we kind of come out of our silos and we start looking around at what else is out there and connecting to other services and making our services and data available to others. So this was what we saw in Estonia. And now at Future Insight, it's hard to replicate a government system because it's all bespoke, it's all custom developed. But at Future Insight, we've developed a service which is quite similar. It's called the Clearly Hub. And this provides also the connection between the data services and the applications and the users. So kind of how to orchestrate that. Open standards are at the heart of everything we do at Future Insight and what I strongly believe in, why I'm in Building Smart and why I do the UBIM task group stuff. Open BIM is there, but it's not only Open BIM, it's also the great work done by standardization organizations like ISO and CEN. We also have, from the GIS side, because there's a mergence of BIM and GIS happening. We have CityGML, and I've also been involved with Construction Classification International, which I know is also a topic here. And I have a short video of just to demo the BIM-based building permit system we developed in Estonia. And I'm not going to play the whole video. You can find it online as well. But the idea is that it's embedded into the building registry interface. So the municipality officials already are familiar with this interface. And we're trying to make it as simple as possible to add BIM features for them. Because if you think about our industry, architects, engineers, contractors, even developers, they already get a lot of benefit from BIM. But who doesn't? These are the guys sitting and doing the building permitting. Because usually they end up with drawings. So we wanted to give them a really nice, simple tool where you can put the BIM model into context with the digital twin. So that's why you need a kind of a surrounding urban twin. So you have better understanding of the visual. And already this visual is a really powerful thing. But the real power comes from the automated checks. So we did like 47 different checks for Estonia, different regulations. There's accessibility, there's fire safety, there's also some design requirements. I add some checks like to see whether doors open the right way. And it's all automated. So you can have machine do a lot of the technical checks. And you don't need to do 100%. You start with some of the small ones, some of the first ones. This one, for example, is checking whether an apartment has an entrance to a public space. And this is, again, something you can do as a self-service platform, so the applicant can go and run these checks themselves before they push the button and announce to the municipality that they want to do some, apply for a permit. And just waiting for the video to show some more complicated checks, some algorithm-based checks where we're actually checking the geometry, whether it can fall off somewhere, how long are the evacuation routes. So these don't rely only on the attributes in the IFC file. These are analyzing the geometry. And granted, this technology is still relatively early days, we're using voxels and stuff, which is quite complicated and processor intensive. This is only going to get better. The more and more different governments are implementing this. And we also did, just recently, this year, with Future Insight, we did another proof of concept. So the building permitting system in Estonia is live. You can go today and apply for a building permit using an IFC model. But for plannings, the situation is much more difficult. It's, you have even more stakeholders involved, and it's even less standardized. So we looked at how we can do and automate some of the planning zoning checks as well to see whether detailed plans meet requirements of general plans. And we did some 5 checks to check the greenery, to check building height, distance to other buildings, and to some regulations. So it's not only about building level, we're already looking at district level about plannings, urban planning, etc. But again, you can find this video on the internet, so it's no point in watching it here. This is not a cinema, so I can just keep talking. But to summarize, let's get back to the why. Why you want to do this BIM-based permitting. Speed, efficiency, because we want to automate. We have a problem that we're not getting permits out quick enough in most countries, and automating an ever-increasing volume of more complicated buildings and assets is really the only way to speed up the process. And don't throw more people or money at it. Develop smarter systems. When you automate something, you automatically also create transparency because it is an algorithm. An algorithm can be checked. It's not biased. Well, in terms of AI, there's also some questions, but we're still dealing with relatively simple algorithms. And we are improving the quality because this helps us to ensure we already get better quality designs before they reach the municipality desk. Because you can do self-service checking and you can analyze and you have your requirements already better defined. So to also leave you with some lessons learned or some stuff to follow, it's also always important to, when you start this, choose the right checks. You shouldn't start with everything about thinking your building code. There was a tender in Bahrain, and they wanted to also automate the building permitting. And they said, well, we asked them, okay, what parts do you want to automate? Well, the whole building code. Here's 800 pages. Really? And sorry, how much do you want to pay for it? Okay, but that is beside the point. It's not about the money. It's about, like, that's mission impossible. Start small, start agile. Choose the right checks, the more valuable ones. BIM requirements, really, really important when you're doing these checks. Because if you look at all the regulations, you can invent all kinds of new attributes and requirements you can add to the models, and you can ask the designers and architects to do. And then they will have a manual of 800 pages of what to put into the IFC model, and they don't know if anybody's actually using it. So that's something I've seen also happen in Estonia, which is a shame. You need multidisciplinary teams to do these checks. So you need to have at least a guy who understands the building permit process. You need a lawyer who understands the regulation, and you need a technical guy who understands the technical limits and the standards. Open standards, can't emphasize this enough. This is the way to ensure vendor neutrality, interoperability, and whenever I talk to governments, they're constantly they have a fetish about open source. But I don't think it's really open source they want. It's open standards that you need. Because with open source, you're opening up a whole box of problems that you really don't maybe comprehend what it means to do open source development. There's a lot of services out there which you can take advantage, and you can start quickly by not reinventing the wheel. And again, start small and do it iteratively, just like startups. And the biggest challenge is not the technology. It is already there. The challenge is implementation. So it's getting up to this mountain. I should have replaced this with a picture of one of your mountains. Would have been nice. But the idea is still there that to implement something, we need to get to the top of the mountain. And the backpack and our gear represents the technology, which is already there. It's all good. And some are ahead, some are behind, some are stuck in snow. But the goal is to get to the top of the mountain. And when I talk about BIM-based permitting across Europe and even outside of Europe, there's a feeling that things are starting to move. Things are starting to change. I'm also doing a workshop here tomorrow for your building specialists about the same topic. And it's kind of like this picture with the rock, like it's been standing there for maybe 100 or 1,000 years, but it's really at the verge of tipping over and something's going to happen. So I do feel we are at this point. 57% of EU municipalities in a recent survey by PwC was commissioned by the European Commission said that they plan to use BIM in their building permits. And this is another driver for actually BIM adoption. Again, the killer app for BIM, because when governments start really using it, not demanding it, it's not about a mandate. It's about actually getting the value and seeing that you can do things better and faster with BIM. Then we start seeing, I think, a much, much faster and a bigger uptake. But of course, governments are slow. The technology is there already from 2022. Building Smart acknowledged Estonian development. We have an EU network for digital building permits with dozens and dozens of different organizations from different countries involved. There's ministries. There's different Horizon projects, Czech, DG Czech, Accord. We're also involved, Estonia, Future Insight, in one of these projects. Lots of companies working, academics investigating the topic, and you need academic investigation. But you shouldn't rely on only that, because academics tend to maybe not think in a more practical way, and there's already very, very good practical solutions, so it's not about researching it. And again, the EU BIM task group, we just had the General Assembly, and you could see we had presentations from most of the members there, and in each of these slides, and they're public on the EU BIM task group website, you can go and check them out and see what's happening on different government levels. You see that they're moving forward with BIM adoption, and a lot of them are already looking at, thinking about doing BIM-based permitting. Few are taking the first steps, and I do believe the rock is kind of starting to move. But with that, I've almost managed to stay in time, and I'll leave you with this slide with just some key takeaways again. The technology is ready, start implementing today, use open standards, be bold and agile, and be prepared to fail. Just like with startups, you're gonna fail, but fail fast and learn from it. So with that, thank you.
Thank you so much for a great talk, Jan, and thank you so much. And if you would just stay with us on the stage for just 1 minute, because there are so many interesting questions we might have after this. All these great analogies you had, comparing it first to data to oil, and then introducing the idea of the killer app and everything, really puts things into context. And before I forget, it was noted your thank you for the recognition of Estonia back in '91. But as many of the people here know, we have actually, well, you have paid us back tremendously, because as people know, Estonia is leading in information technology in so many fields, and especially when it comes to the service of governments. When governments are creating help desks with various services, they tend to look to Estonia for guidance, and I know that the Icelandic government has done so. So we are really leading in that field, and we're very appreciative of your advice in this field as well. So you ended up on some notes about initiative. You encourage people here to take initiative, and we know that we both have people from the private sector and the government here in the room. So I guess the question I have here is, because we are, just like you explained in this one of these final slides, the stone is just about to tip over, but who should take the initiative, especially when it comes to permits, the government or the private sector?
Well, in my mind, there's no doubt about it. It has to be the government. Mm-hmm. And I'm also involved in this Accord project, this Horizon research project on BIM-based permitting, mm-hmm. and we're preparing this education package. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the partners are also saying, well, we need to have one for architects, we need to have one for software developers, and in my mind, we just need to focus on one. It's the starter package for the governments.
Is it harder to move the government forward than the private sector?
Yes, trust me. I've tried now for a while with other governments. In Estonia, when you're in the government, it was quite easy. But when you're outside and you're trying to push other governments, you realize maybe not everybody is that kind of agile or open to it. And I'm kind of remembered why I left the government then. But no, yeah, I think it's the governments, and that's why I'm up here on stage today and in other places. And I was in Marrakesh also talking on the same subject, using the same slides, recycling what we have, so not to create more digital waste.
And we have some people from the government here in this room, and I know that they are very appreciative of this encouragement. And thank you so much for being with us. And I encourage you as well to speak with Jaan during the coffee break. And that is actually next on the agenda. We will be able to enjoy some coffee and some snacks just right outside, returning here to this room in half an hour or so. Thank you so much. Thank you.